Okay, so we've got 4 talks left, and we're going to start with Dom, our friend from the CU, who is going to talk about living with God.
Okay, hi guys, my name's Dom. I'm what you would label a Christian. I've been a Christian for 8 years now, and what I'm going to be talking about is largely not going to be a bunch of objective arguments. It's largely not going to be a critique of what people have said, and it's largely going to be subjective about my own experiences. I don't apologise for that. So what does it mean to live with God? Well, as a Christian, I read this quite a lot and believe what it says in varying different ways. Now, I'm quickly going to go through what this book talks about in terms of living with God. Because essentially this book is about living with God, and that's it. Right at the start, we see, as mentioned earlier, Christians believe that we were created by God, that we were created to be in a relationship with God, and that we're created in His image. Funny anecdote, when I was 9 years old, I read in a book that life was composed of, cells were composed of carbon and phosphorus and oxygen and nitrogen and various other substances. So I thought, oh great, I'll get some ashes, and I'll get some soil, and I'll get some water, put some air in there, stick a lightning rod up to the roof of, to the top of my climbing frame, and I can create life. So humans have some desire to create. We're created in the image of God, and we can love and create. So we're created to be in a relationship with Him, and the Genesis talks about how back then, whether you believe it's allegorical or whether you think it's literal, or it says that we were with God in some way, but then through our rejection of God, we were separated from Him. And God knew that we were going to do this. He gave us choice to reject Him or not. And so God had a plan all along to bring us back to Him, which is Jesus. The Bible, all the way through the Old Testament, gives us a picture of how God interacts with His people, how God never leaves His people, even when they reject Him. And it talks about someone who's going to come and going to bring the people back to God, and that's Jesus. There's numerous kind of things that it says about Jesus before He was around. It says that He was, in Isaiah, it says that He was pierced for our transgressions, He's crushed for our iniquities, and the punishment that brings us peace is upon Him. So then the Old Testament finishes, there's like a 400-year gap with no more prophecies. And then some guy comes who's saying, this Messiah who we've been hearing about for thousands of years, He's coming to bring us back to God, so that once again we can live with God. And that would be Jesus. And Jesus came and He died for us so that we could be with God again by taking on sort of punishment for the things that have separated us from God. So that's kind of what we believe. And then the implications of that is that when we die, we go to heaven. And as Revelations describes it, that's when the dwelling of God is with men. He will live with them. They will be His people, and God Himself will be with them and be their God. He will wipe every tear from their eyes. There will be no more death or mourning or crying or pain. The old order of things has passed away. That was a very, very quick summary. And not the best summary ever. But what you were saying earlier about evangelism and being a Christian, the only thing that gets you to God is believing in Jesus. The only thing that gets you to God is Jesus. Evangelism, the things you do, being good or telling other people about God, doesn't get you to God. It's not a requirement that you're a Christian, ergo you must do this, otherwise no. You believe in Jesus, that's it. You're saved by His works, not your own works. So where does that put me, having been a Christian for 8 years? So my father is an atheist. He's very fixed in his views, and he's very strongly atheistic. My mum she was a theist for most of her life, believing in some kind of Christian morals and in God and some concept of Jesus to some extent. But when I was probably about 6 or 7, we moved back to this country, we moved to a different place, and she started going to church, started learning more about Jesus and learning more about the Bible and relearning the things that she'd been taught when she was little. And she started to think, actually, I need to start living my life in a different way. So she would say became a Christian then. And I got taken to church Sunday mornings. I went to a really traditional Anglican church, and for a 7-year-old, this is pretty much the worst thing in the world. It was terrible. I really didn't like it. And then as I got older, we moved somewhere else, and my mum and my sister started going to this new church. My sister became Christian, and I had some sense of God, and you could say that came from my mother. She was, predominantly a theist through my early childhood, and told me that God existed, and I guess I picked that up from her and started to think that God existed. But I sort of always thought, well, God exists, but I'm still going to die, my consciousness is going to end, there will be nothing. And I thought that, and it was pretty, wasn't great. But then when I was probably 11, I started going to this church that my mum and my sister were going to, kind of out of choice, decided I should start thinking about things a bit more, and I started learning more. And I guess I had the hypothesis that, well, if God is true, if any of this stuff is true, if I start actually seeking it more actively, if I start living it, if I start looking into it, then if it's true, it'll be made clear to me, it'll be revealed to me, and if it's not true, then I can say, great, and keep going the way I was going.